Welcome to the Master B2B series. This is the world's first and only unwebinar series. Thrilled that you're joining us today. This is an unwebinar. This is a debate style format, and we're tackling the key issues for B2B companies, manufacturers, and distributors in this format. And it's new and exciting, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Andy Hoar. My name is Brian Beck. Andy is my partner in this effort, and Andy is a veteran of this field. He is one of the globe's preeminent thinkers around e-commerce, and he spent 10 years at Forrester running the B2B practice. He's the founder of the Combine B2B Combine, which is all about evaluation of e-commerce platforms. Andy, I am thrilled to be joined with you again today on this session.
Well, thanks, Brian. Great to be here again as a co-host. And for those of you who don't know who Brian is, he's a 20-year e-commerce industry veteran. He's an industry consultant, and he's the author of this book, which I'm contractually obligated to mention at every moment. So he's the author of $1 Billion B2B e-commerce. And by the way, Brian, just so people know, I took the liberty of adding a little banner to the back that indicates who wrote the foreword. Yes. In the book itself, just in case people want to know.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate that, and certainly it's the best part of the book, of course, as you would say. But no, thank you for your forward. And so I'm thrilled to be here today, guys. And this is not a webinar. This is an unwebinar. We have practitioners. We're going to introduce those in just a few minutes. We also have a sponsor today, Adobe, and they're going to participate in the debate with us. So this is really, really exciting. And the end of our unwebinar today, we're going to reveal the winner of the debate. So let's get right to it, Andy. This is all about headless commerce. Is it the future of B2B? And before every one of these, Andy, we post a question on LinkedIn, and we ask, the industry, what do you think? And my goodness, we had over 11,000 views, likes, shares, comments. We had people like Joe Sickman at Forrester and Amit Gupta, the CIO of Paul Corporation. We had Brian McGlynn. We had John Bruno. We had all these folks contributing. And this is a hot topic, Andy. And I was going through some of the list of folks who signed up for this today, and I see some of them joining us here. This is a laundry list of the leaders in industry across the world. We've got Ferguson, Grainger, we got Snap-on, Siemens, Ascendant, Caterpillar, Brady Corporation. I mean, this is, I see MSA Safety, Sean Donovan just joined, BASF, I see he just joined, Alessandro Pastillo. This is a hot topic. And the industry is trying to figure out, I think, Andy, is this a real thing? Is headless commerce something that companies should invest in? Or is it the latest fad that software companies are trying to foist on all of us practitioners? What is really the deal here? What's the issue, Andy?
Yeah, so we usually jump right to that, but I think it's helpful, especially based on what you just said, for us to talk a little bit about how you would define headless commerce. So there's sort of a formal definition and an informal definition. Let me take everybody through both. So formally, you could look at it as kind of an e-commerce architecture where the front-end experience is effectively decoupled from the back-end commerce engine. We'll go into more detail about this in a moment. That's the way I think most people formally define it. But informally, and this often gets confused with the formal definition, it's really a method for using APIs to connect a growing number of digital touch points, and we'll talk about what those are, with core commerce features. That said, I think it's helpful to define something, but oftentimes it's just as helpful to talk about what something isn't. And so we thought we'd take you through that as well. So what headless commerce is not is a monolith, a full stack solution, or an all-in-one offering. Now, that said, it's still a complex topic, and I suspect there are people out there thinking right now, I get the first, I get the second, but I'm still struggling a little bit to understand exactly what is the difference between headless commerce and, say, a full stack all-in-one offering. So those who know me well know that I'm quite fond of analogies. And so I was banging my head against the wall there thinking, how can I explain headless commerce with an analogy? And bear with me, I think I have an interesting one. So like everybody else during the pandemic, I had to DIY a few things, as in do it yourself. And one of the things that we had to DIY in this household was my haircut. So what's interesting here is I did a bunch of research to figure out, what kind of grooming kit to buy so my wife could actually cut my hair. And, I'm a research nerd, so I spent way too much time looking at this and concluded that the 18-piece set was the one that was going to work for me. And you can see it on the screen. There are literally 18 pieces to this. Well, a full year later, you won't be surprised to hear that after, I don't know, 6 or 7, I think very good haircuts, I mean, you can tell me what you think, by my wife, we discovered that at the end of the day, we only ended up using 2 of the clips. So the other 16 were essentially gratuitous. So what's the point here? The point is Headless is like the 18-piece set. If my wife was a professional stylist, if we knew how to use this stuff, if there was more we wanted to do, if it wasn't quite customizable enough, that was the right solution. I think there are a lot of companies out there who are buying commerce who think the same way. Let's buy the 18-piece set because we're going to need all that stuff to compete, and we have the right kind of people to do it. Then there are probably a group of people out there who are going to discover, like me, that you really don't need all that stuff. And what I learned is that if I just could have bought the 2-piece version, which is actually not possible, but you could buy the 11-piece version, get the 2 pieces, and the 2 pieces basically come attached to the thing out of the box. Another analogy here, out of the box, there were 2 pieces that I could use without having to do any customization or anything. I did my own configuration by attaching it to the clips. That's it. So the point here is that, if you're talking about if you need a lot of flexibility and a lot of a need for customization, then maybe a headless approach is the right approach. And you have to decide for yourself if that's what you need or not. Or if you want to do something maybe more simplified, more out of the box, then that could be the right one for you. So, back to the headless world itself and away from the analogy for a moment, what does this really mean? What's at stake here? And, companies I've talked to in the past are making this hard decision about what kind of architecture to move forward with. It all comes down to the same thing, which is there are hard costs, meaning money that you have to spend out of your pocket. There are also opportunity costs. Look, if we make the wrong choice, we spend too much time and money on this, we could have gotten up and running earlier with an MVP, for example. Maybe we didn't need as much functionality. Maybe we get to headless later and we start with all-in-one to begin with. People putting their reputations on the line. We all know people who have made the right decision and done well, and other people have made the wrong decision on platforms and had to re-platform over and over again, and it hurts their reputation and hence their career. So, there's a lot at stake here. Companies are trying to figure out, how to win in this digital first world. And this is one of those discussions, headless versus all-in-one.
That's right, Andy. And, it's people's jobs are at stake here. I really do. I do think that, I lived this myself in my 17 years as an operator, VP eCom at multiple companies. Early in my career, Andy, I replatformed twice in 2 years, right? I made the wrong platform decision, and that cost us competitive advantage. It cost us revenue. It cost us all kinds of things. This is a really, really critical decision. So let's get to the debate now. In a debate format, Andy, you need 2 sides, right? So we have some fantastic practitioners today. We're going to bring them on. Now, I lean a little more towards the full stack side. I know you're a little more on the headless side. We're going to bring our practitioners up, and I am thrilled to be joined on my team full stack by one of the leading folks out there doing this work in the field. This is Miss Adrienne the Hammer Hartman. Adrienne, you have your hammer? I got mine. You got a hammer? All right. She brought a hammer to the fight. I love it. So Adrienne is the Senior Director of eCommerce at J.J. Keller, which is a leading manufacturer of safety products. And Adrienne has been in this field for almost 20 years. She started in B2C e-commerce at Land's End, and she's driven millions of dollars in e-commerce. And the fact that she's been through replatforming several times, I am really, really interested, Adrienne, in your perspective on full stack, why you're leaning that way. Adrienne says, and I quote, "Full stack platforms aren't going anywhere." So, Adrienne, I'm thrilled to have you here. Andy and I are so excited you're in this debate. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Andy, introduce your team, sir.
Yeah, so I have 2 people on my team. In the interest of time, I'll go quickly on this. So we have Vincent, the Monster Mugavero. It sounds intimidating just to say the name, actually. And like I like to say, when Vincent's not eating glass for breakfast, he's the VP of Digital Commerce at Carrier Enterprise, which is a division of Watsco. And I have Vincent's quote here about Headless. He says, A headless approach provides the flexibility and nimbleness that full stack solutions simply can't deliver. So we're looking forward to hearing more from Vincent about that. So welcome, Vincent.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we're also lucky to have with us a former colleague of mine. And we're going with the title here, Peter Head Slamming Sheldon. So Peter and I worked together at Forrester, in full disclosure, for a couple of years. And Peter's now the Senior Director of Commerce Strategy at Adobe. It's a pretty significant role. And Peter's take on this is a bit of a hybrid in that he says the issue isn't headless per se. It's really about decoupling systems so that you can maximize development flexibility. So Adobe has two offerings here. And so Peter's going to jump in where he thinks he has value to add on this. So he might be on both sides, but he's going to be largely on the headless side in this debate. So I got two, you got one. Brian, let's bring it on.
All right, I think it's time. Let's rumble. All right, Andy, I'm keeping time. Let's go.
Okay, so round one is really an overarching question about, does headless spell the end of full stack solutions? So that's the overarching kind of theme of this particular discussion. We have 8 minutes. Brian's going to keep us honest on that. So here's the first question. Does the flexibility you get with headless outweigh the additional complexity that's required as a part of the integration? Vincent, you're up. Tell us your take on this one.
Yes, absolutely. I think the flexibility is certainly a primary benefit and the one that's most talked about. But in the short term, it's really the improved customer experience is what you're going to realize first. At Carrier Enterprise, we've made the transition from an old school, full stack, monolithic platform to now a headless solution built on Magento PWA Studios on the front end, our single head, essentially. And we've realized page load speeds cut in half, creating that super agile, lightning fast mobile app-like experience that even B2B customers deserve. So it's really the customer experience that you're going to realize immediate benefits from.
Well, it sounds like you're an advocate. I suspect Peter will be a bit of an advocate too, and then Brian's going to rip us up with the hammer in a second. But Peter, what would you like to add to that, or do you have some thoughts on that as well?
No, I mean, I think Vincent hit the nail on the head. It's all about the customer experience and having the agility and flexibility as a creative team to not only design an experience that's unique to your brand and how you want to differentiate from your competitors, but it's all about performance. It's about having a performant experience. It just that sort of instant gratification as you're navigating, as you're going through that experience. And I think so often sort of legacy full stack platforms were never designed with that in mind, and that's why a headless approach really sort of unlocks that capability.
All right, Adrian, you got the hammer. I think you're going to beat this one down. Tell us where we're wrong.
So really, being headless or with a head or unheadless, whatever the opposite of headless is, one or the other isn't necessarily better from that customer experience. And it really is about that customer. Put ourselves in the customer's shoes, from awareness to consideration, product selection, purchase, reorder, the entire process. The question is, how do we make it easier for our customers to buy from us? And how do we beat the competition? How are we differentiating? And we aren't necessarily differentiating on that tech stack. We're differentiating on how we present the features and the functionality. You can have an unheadless, a non-headless site that's lightning fast as well. And all the major players now have these API forward architectures. It doesn't have to be full on headless, roll your own storefront to be flexible and to present an amazing customer experience.
I see Brian's happy about that. Brian, anything you want to add?
Good argument, Adrian. We sell products in e-commerce. We don't sell websites or technology, right? Ultimately. So yes, I agree.
Adrian, go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to say, when we go this non-headless route, we're getting the storefront and that commerce engine from that one vendor. Really, it's one ass to kick. If something goes wrong, these are designed and they're built to go together. Going back, Andy, to your hair trimmer, those pieces and components were designed to go together. Sure, my kid could 3D print a different adapter to go on that, but there's no guarantee that's going to work, and you're not going to end up with a reverse mohawk when you use his for the first time.
Great points, Adrian. Yes.
You had me going there for a second. I was thinking maybe I should have talked to Adrian's son before I bought the clippers, but then you said a reverse mohawk, and I'm like, no, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, well, so let's flip the argument around. So, Adrian, does the ease of configuration, arguably, of a full stack solution outweigh the loss of functionality associated with best of breed? So, are you sacrificing something here? You spoke a little bit to this, but what exactly are you sacrificing? Or are you going to argue that you really aren't sacrificing anything with your largely full stack solution?
Right. I don't really know what we would be sacrificing. So with API forward, we've got modern architecture that's being used by this, and that decouples a lot of the architecture. So we can leverage this integration in the way that we need. We can still, even with the true full stack, we can incorporate best of breed other tools. So we can pull in address standardization, we can pull in a product finder, we can pull in a configurator. So you can already do all of that. It's not as though you're limited with the functionality that you have. And further, you can still extend that application to other heads, if it will. So if you wanted to have a mobile app, or you wanted to have it deployed to a different site entirely, you can do that. There's no loss of functionality there just for not having the head.
Hey, by the way, Andy, Bill just weighed in. He said, Adrian just dropped the hammer. Okay, I like that. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so Vincent and Peter. So Adrian just said, don't need Headless to get done what she needs to get done.
You know, ease of configuration, that's like hitting the easy button. Who's got the easy button out there? You know, you're going to lose that flexibility. You're going to lose that lightning fast app-like experience. Lose the ability to rapidly deploy front-end changes to meet and exceed your customers' expectations without interfering with the back end. The back end you keep solid as a rock, interfaced with your ERP, and you constantly evolve the front end much quicker than you can do in a full stack type solution. And in terms of best of breed, you can certainly kick one ass with a vendor. I mean, look at Magento. They offer both a front end and back end stack. Znode, Shopify Plus, BigCommerce, they all offer full front end and back end packages, so you can continue to work with one supplier. Don't have to overcomplicate it.
Peter, is that true?
It is true. I mean, I think there's a middle ground here. I mean, certainly, you know, you can go and build a completely custom front end, or you can go to a vendor that provides a front end as a service, or, you know, some kind of front end development kit that's a different vendor from your back end. And I think the challenge when you do that is just that it's like stitching these things together, and, you know, will they work together? Are there features in the back end that, you know, the front end won't work with, or vice versa? And I think there's challenges, but, you know, going to, you know, there are Adobe, Magento included, and others. There are vendors that have a completely decoupled modern front end architecture that have modern, you know, GraphQL, APIs that, you know, the back end and the front end are effectively two completely separate products, two completely separate components. But the value prop from the single vendor is that, you know, we guarantee they work together. And so, you know, I think there is sort of a best of both worlds here.
15 seconds, Andy. We got 15 seconds left in this round.
Well, my team ended early here, so
that's because they have not much to say. The hammer was dropped, and we win. Adrian, one question for you came in from the audience from Chris Young. How quickly can changes be made to your online data and content? And you have 5 seconds left. Please address.
Pretty much real time. Depends on what it is. Some things we're making changes real time, same day. Other things, it totally depends on exactly that. But yes, we're able to meet the business needs with changes that we make.
Hammer time. It's time to go to the poll. Oh, wait, Vincent has one last thing to add. Andy?
Let me make a quick point. In a headless solution, you can inject front-end changes during the day in real time without any downtime. And kind of an inherent benefit of headless.
Well, let's call the bell, put them back in their corners. It's not like they want to keep fighting. We got another 2 rounds to go here. So save some for the next rounds. Okay. Let's put up the poll. So, we've heard from the experts here. Now we want to actually hear from the audience. So those of you on our last one know that we post a poll with every round. You vote, and then we reveal the results at the end. So the question is, does the flexibility Headless promises offer more value than the simplicity of integrating full stack solutions? Yes or no? So if you're voting yes, then you're voting for Headless. If you're voting no, then you're voting for full stack. And you've heard all the arguments. Let us know what you think. So Brian, what did you think of the first round?
So number one, great points on both sides. I think, flexibility is important, but quite frankly, Andy, I think it's overkill in a lot of cases. And we'll talk more about that in the next round. But, people buy products. Adrian made this point. People buy products. They don't want websites. And I've made this mistake in my career, Andy, running e-commerce, where I get hung up on the latest thing, the latest architecture, the latest tool, et cetera. I mean, ultimately, we got to remember as e-commerce operators, as businesses, we sell products and we need to meet the need of the customer in that manner. I mean, there's reasons like, for example, Sears, right? You take the example of Sears on the B2C side. They invested millions in their e-commerce site. They forgot, if people don't buy the technology they built, it's the longest, liquidation sale in history. Sears is. I mean, ultimately, what we want to be delivering here is an ease of experience for the customer. And I think Headless may be overkill in many situations, but we're going to get into it. What did you think?
I think it depends on how you're going to use your commerce platform. What do you need? Just like with my hair trimmer, what did I really need? That was the mistake. I didn't do enough requirements gathering up front. And I should have. And had I done that, I probably would have decided I need 2 clips. But I will stress this point, an argument for the full stack crowd, because I think it's an important one. It was touched on here. Yep. Flexibility is not an inherent good. Flexibility can cost you time and resources as well.
Yes.
And so if you're thinking about what platform architecture you're going to use, you got to keep that one in mind as well.
Yep. So I think we got to go to round 2. That was 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, Andy, I'm going to take round 2 here. And so we were talking about this a little bit at the end of the last round, which is really about other specific, use cases or types of B2B businesses where Headless makes sense. And so our first question is Headless the right approach for a digitally mature organization that needs to meet high B2B buyer expectations and compete with, the best of breed B2B companies out there? So I'm going to go to Vincent. We'll go to Team Headless first. Vincent, what do you think on this topic?
I don't know, Brian, this sounds like a softball question.
I don't know about that, but
if you're a digitally mature organization, partnering with a very experienced agency, then I think the answer is easy. If you're serious about keeping up with Amazon Business or keeping up with best-in-class B2B companies in your space, the answer is clear. You need to decouple so you can innovate faster. And essentially, you stretch your investment. You think of it as a 5-year technology investment, not a 2-year, right? You go to full stack solution 2 years from now, you're going to want to jump to the Headless option. What does that mean? Another replatform, right? Investment number 2, customer impact number 2, and you're not updating features along that course. So right. I think you're buying insurance.
It's interesting perspective, an insurance policy that's an interesting concept, sort of the idea of future-proofing the business. Peter, what do you think?
That's it, exactly. You're future-proofing the business. And I think also in that sort of digitally mature organization, you've got, I think often a sort of development culture that, feels sort of constrained by, corporate policies and so on and so forth. And so there's often this desire to really sort of get their hands dirty with the latest and greatest and prove that, we're not this stodgy, sort of IT org, that actually we are nimble, that we can act like a startup, that, we have that sort of startup innovation. And so I think that, in those digitally mature organizations, there is this desire to, have more control, to, to not be held inside of the confines of sort of guardrails that might come with, say, a full stack solution, and to be able to, as an IT development front end experience org, prove that, we're not the stodgy org, that, we've got that startup innovation sort of sphere to us, and that's, Headless really unlocks that creativity, I think.
Yeah, so Peter, I mean, great points. And you guys are talking about future proofing, right? Now that's a great word, flexibility, great word. But I want to talk about use cases. Adrian, Well, I mean, what are the, is this, do you agree with this? I mean, what are you really sacrificing here? Do you need to have all these edge use cases, or is it really just about the core e-commerce functionality? What are you giving up?
So I think about e-commerce is a sales channel for the company. It's a customer acquisition channel. It's a sales channel for the company. We need to meet those customer expectations, provide smooth, fast, stable buying experience. The complexity, bringing additional complexity doesn't bring more value to the business. Having IT feel like they're on the latest, greatest cutting edge of technology, that doesn't bring value to the business or sell more widgets. The latest UI, obviously we need to have and be able to meet the customer's expectations, and we need to be able to provide all those core B2B functions and experiences, including things like contract buying and quotes and approvals and all of that. But you don't have to have headless for that. And with some of the modern platforms that are available out there now, we are future proofed by moving to those, and there is still that potential in the future. Yeah, you could swap out the head if you wanted to, if there was a business reason to do so in the future. So it's not as though you're backing yourself into a corner.
Interesting. So I sense a little bit of business versus IT in here too.
Yeah. Well, and
Well,
remember, I'm former IT way back in my day, and I am business side now, but I do lead a development team in addition to creative and marketing team. So
interesting.
I cover that all. Yes.
Gotcha. No, so okay. So let's take the opposite, guys. Peter and Vincent, you were making the argument that for a digitally mature organization, headless is right because you're future proofing. You need the flexibility. What about a company that is just starting in e-commerce that maybe doesn't have any existing? Maybe they have, maybe it's a simpler use case. Maybe there's one ERP. Maybe there's, not they're just getting started. They have nothing to replace. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take an analogy like Andy. I mean, when you're buying a headless platform, in some ways, you're buying the space shuttle, and if you don't have the astronauts and the team that knows how to fly the space shuttle, to Andy's point, do you need the 11 heads of the Clipper? And so I think this is where you really got to sort of put your future-proof, hat on and look at, the investment you're making in your commerce platform, not as a 2 or even 5 year sort of ROI. You got to look out to the end of the decade and say, look, replatforming is really, really painful. I don't want to have to go through this, more than once. And so although, a full stack approach where the vendor I'm buying my commerce platform is also giving me a sort of fully out of the box, ready to go templated head is almost certainly the right approach for a sort of digitally immature organization. At the same time, you also want to have that conversation with your vendor and say, well, is your head actually decoupled from the underlying services of the backend commerce platform? And are those APIs there? Are they modern, performant GraphQL APIs so that in the future, maybe at 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out, as my online sales, rocket, and all of a sudden I acquire other brands, and I've got all of these requirements to really enhance that front end user experience. Am I sort of now boxed in with this, inflexible coupled head, or can I, innovate and build a new head on top of those APIs in the future? So I think it's about future proofing.
That's interesting, Peter. And what about organizations that don't have that team of astronauts or the people that are, what if they have limited IT resources? What do you do in that case?
Yeah, I mean, if you're throwing that question back at me, I mean, I think if you've got limited IT resources, there is only one approach, and this is where I've kind of floated in the middle of the debate. You have to go down that full stack approach, because you're just not going to have the budget to find that talent out in the marketplace or make that investment.
Interesting. So you just made an argument for Team Full Stack.
I did.
Yeah. All right.
Peter, you're fired from Team Headless.
Hello, Peter.
All right. Vincent's saying timeout. He has something to say here. Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, I mean, the right answer here, guys, is that, agencies have been building headless solutions for 2+ years. It's 2021. This is not cutting edge new technology anymore. So I encourage you to partner with a couple agencies, come in, do a discovery, and get to a quick start. Project where you put in a box your core B2B fundamentals, the bread and the butter, the cart, wish lists and things of that nature. Get to that quick start implementation. At Carey Enterprise, we had one solution architect and developer, so we had to partner with 2 mature agencies from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And partnering with those mature agencies, now you're essentially beholden to them forevermore. It's one thing to build up a site and stand something up and have it so that your team can support things moving forward. But I don't want to be beholden to an agency because we've built such complex piecemeal integrations that it requires someone with this deep embedded knowledge of all those pieces and components that have been put together, that I can't pick up and move my business either in-house or finding a new outsourced provider. The site should work, and it's really not what I want my technical people focusing on, is some of that plumbing and that site support. I want my team focusing on improving SEO and improving conversion and all of the components of what the site is adding value in, not in orchestrating all these components to make sure they can work together.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time, Andy. Adrian, great argument. Vincent, Peter, awesome. I think we need to go over to our poll question. So back to your corners, guys. Let's go to the poll. So here's our poll question. Does the headless approach only really work for B2B businesses with specific profiles? Answer yes or no. And if you're voting yes, you're saying headless is it, that's the future. If you're saying no, you're saying there's a good place for full stack. So go ahead and place your votes. You have 2 minutes to do so. Andy, that was a really interesting back and forth. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought what was cool was there was a characteristic comment that was put in the chat window by one of our audience members who said, "So is headless for whiny developers who want to play more?"
Interesting.
And what's kind of funny about that is I think there is a thought among many companies, basically the buyers and the sellers of technology, that headless is a toy store. It's a place for people to go play with stuff versus the full stack approach, which is, get out of the box, hook it up, configure it, and move forward. And you said business versus IT. There's some argument that the IT folks like the headless a bit more and the business people like the full stack for some of the reasons we mentioned here. I think the arguments were really good. I do wonder about the maturity level. I think if you're a far more mature company, I think headless does make a little more sense because you need more flexibility. The real question is, what do you do if you're just starting out? Should you jump right into headless, or is headless kind of next generation versus first generation?
Yeah, and the way I look at it too, Andy, as you're starting out, and I've seen this in the market working with companies of different sizes, right? So, if you're a large global manufacturer, for example, and you have use case, you have a lot of systems deployed across 100 countries, and you've got multiple lines of business. And say you're a manufacturer where you can integrate things like IoT into your equipment. I have a case study of Bosch in my book to talk about how they used IoT in their equipment to do proactive ordering of parts and maintenance and service. I mean, this is the use cases, in my opinion, where headless really comes to life. Where if you're a large global organization, even new to e-commerce, and you need to roll this out step by step, crawl, walk, run, headless provides a good opportunity for you to a good way for you to do that, because you're going to integrate more easily to multiple systems and countries and legacy processes. So, all right, we're out of time on this session. We need to go to the next. All right, Andy, round 3 is yours. Let's go.
Round 3, final round. Okay, let's wrap it up here. So this is all about the question, back to my Clippers analogy, are you overbuying perhaps with headless? There have been some comments made about that. Let's kind of double click on it. So here's the question. Do you really need or want multiple heads? I mean, we should maybe ask this question at the beginning. Headless enables you to have multiple heads. Well, what if you don't need multiple heads? And what are multiple heads? So let's go to you first, Vincent. What are your thoughts on that? Why does Carrier need multiple heads?
Yeah, we all need multiple heads, right? Maybe we could think twice as fast. I don't know. You do want multiple heads so you're positioned again for the future, so that you can quickly innovate and plug into other systems, hardware, what have you. At Carrier Enterprise and through our parent company Watsco, we have a number of best-in-class SaaS offerings, right, to make our customers more productive. So that's one use case where it's really easy now for us to integrate the front end with multiple SaaS offerings, maybe lockers down the road and so forth, without having to touch the back end. So you have a small, SWAT team working on the front end only, interchanging with different third-party applications. It opens up to a world of possibilities. You don't have to overcomplicate it on day one.
Peter, you're working for a company that offers both solutions. How do you sort of position this to people who say, hey, do I really need multiple heads? Why should I go headless versus full stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we certainly see our larger prospects and customers, big, large, enterprises like Carrier, they have very legitimate use cases for multiple heads. They have native apps, they have web experiences, they have experiences that are embedded into their marketing sites, into their social channels, etc. And that's very, very legitimate. And I think, the flexibility of headless really supports that. I think when we get into more of a sort of SMB or mid-market, B2B manufacturer, for the most part, they don't have the appetite for doing that, and they have one head. But the importance is, I think, solutions like progressive web apps, where a progressive web app starts to solve for kind of multiple scenarios. It's mobile, it's desktop, but it's also incredibly fast. It has an app-like experience. It can be installed on a phone. It can be installed on a desktop. All of a sudden, actually, from a single head, you're solving multiple use cases. So I think but you still, again, the headless word is a little misleading because it suggests that you need multiple heads. It's not really about that. It's about decoupling and unlocking the creativity and the flexibility and the agility of the front end team to innovate much, much faster than the back end team is doing.
So Adrian, you don't have that agility, you don't have that flexibility, and you're a single head. Apparently that's what they're saying here. Is that true?
Well, no, I don't think multiple heads and headless are the same thing. You can have multiple heads and have a full stack and use APIs to extend some of the applications into other applications and other uses. So it isn't inherent that it has to be headless. There goes Brian with the hammer. But if we're able to have this storefront, this one cohesive storefront and application, and then be able to extend that into other things, then it's fewer points of failure. Then we have fewer vendors, for example. And I know we talk about how digitally mature and wanting to have it more complicated. Well, oftentimes, and we're seeing this more and more large companies want fewer vendors. They're trying to manage down their number of vendors. It improves from a data security perspective, all of your contact points. It simplifies invoices and everything. So it's just another one of those flavors of, do we really need that complexity when we could, from this one storefront and application, extend it into the other applications where it's needed?
So I want to take the other angle on this one as well. So you mentioned simplicity and complexity, right? They're opposites here. If you're building a world-class experience, there's something to be argued here for decomplexifying. I keep using this word. I'm not sure it's a real word, but simplifying, and so that you can actually focus on the experience and not the technology. So here's the question for you, Vincent. Do you risk undermining the cause of creating a better experience by tying together non-native systems? I mean, it sounds great that we can bring all these things together. I'll devil's advocate here, using APIs, and we can use best of breed, et cetera, and it'll all just work. But as Adrian just pointed out, and I think she'll probably go into some detail about it, more points of failure is more points of failure.
Too many non-native systems, too many heads. I think all that sounds like a train wreck. I agree, but it's not reality. No one wakes up in the morning, I know I didn't, to plan on implementing a headless solution with a dozen or 18 different heads. That's not reality. What you want to do is get to a starting point, as Peter alluded to. It's PWA Studios, your single head serving multiple endpoints. But now you have the ability to have the agility to quickly implement and improve upon front-end features to really exceed your customer's expectation. It's all about the customer, not the technology here. I think of it as sustainable e-commerce, right? It's no more costly upgrades, no more replatforming, no more costs. You spend your company's money wisely. You got an investment at last.
Adrian, your thoughts?
I'm also focused on spending my company's money wisely, because I think about this, that I'm this e-commerce channel, and it's my job to bring in the most sales and the most customers for the lowest cost, both in terms of implementation, in terms of ongoing support, to find the right ROI that meets the company's expectations. And so it's finding that balance. And I don't want to gold plate something, future proofing it for something that may or may not happen happen 8 years down the line when I can deliver them value quickly and at an economical way. I know someone in the business, pretty big company, and they were working on an implementation. They worked on it for 2 years, gold plating everything. It was going to be the fanciest thing ever because they were accounting for every potential thing that might go wrong with all these things they were hooking together. They finally scrapped it after 2 years of trying to go down this path of complexity and just pulled it all back to a much more simple experience that they could finally get something live.
Well, so let me build on that because we had a comment here from one of our audience members. I want to run this at you, Adrian. This person claims, and I quote, omnichannel experiences require headless. You can't extend APIs to channel partners on a full stack. Do you agree with that?
I do not agree with that. So a use case that I can mention is we have sites that we build as a product for our customers that they have access to. And then we're able to actually take the cart and extend the cart through APIs so that they could check out within that site. So it does not need to be headless to be able to do that, to have that flexibility.
I thought you might say that. Okay, so Brian, I think we're at the end of round 3.
We are. Yep.
Once again, we finish early. You run long. So
well, let's go to the poll. Bring up our poll question. There it is. Andy, go ahead.
Okay, simple question. Are you overbuying flexibility and capacity with headless? Very simple question. If the answer is yes, then you think you're overbuying to basically a full stack house. If you answer is no, then you think you're not overbuying and headless is great. So yes is full stack. In this case, no is headless. So Brian, what did you think about that last round?
Yeah, that was a great exchange. Yeah, that was a great exchange, Andy. And I think, this just reinforces the need to understand your use case. I mean, we can talk about this in abstractions, but coming from 2 decades of as an operator, as Adrian pointed out, look, you got to solve for practical use cases in your business. You need, this isn't about putting, order taking robots on the streets, to take credit cards, for no reason. This is a practical application. And I find that, we need to be proving out those cases. We need to be looking at what the customer's need is. And it goes back to understanding what the customer is. I love the argument, where Vincent and Peter were making, though, the case was around, the different touch points. Peter was talking about, native apps and social channels and enabling commerce at that point, in all these different touch points. I agree with you. But if you're a business trying to evaluate this for your company, you have to really look closely at whether those use cases exist and not solve for something just because it's cool, right? I've made that mistake, built out functionality and never gotten it used. And it's not something that you should be solving for in all practical sense. What did you think, Andy?
Yeah, just a quick point. My sense is that there are new digital touch points emerging every day. Some of them are legitimate. Some of them are just shiny toys. And the way to think about it is, what are the use cases? Like you keep mentioning, if your use case demands that you have this digital touch point, then do it. If not, then it's just a distraction. So on that note, we're going to go to the end here, transition to the closing argument. And every one of our own webinars, we give one of our members an opportunity to kind of wrap it up. In this case, Peter's going to spend a minute talking about his philosophy on this headless versus all-in-one argument. So Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think the first thing is I absolutely hate the term headless. I think it's very, very misleading. I think it creates connotations that for merchants that suggests that they have to build a head, that they're going to have lots and lots of different heads, that they should have a best of breed sort of architecture where they have one vendor for the back end, but a completely different vendor for their CMS or their headless front end as a service. And that's just all simply false. I think what Headless is really about is decoupling the complexities of the back end from the front end, and that's where not all APIs are sort of built equal. I mean, yes, every vendor has APIs, but it's about modern, fast APIs that really sort of remove the complexity so that a front-end developer doesn't have to know anything about the back-end platform, doesn't have to be trained or certified in it. They can just go and build experiences at their own pace, and to do so independently, unconstrained. And that's what this is all about. It's about unlocking the creativity, the ingenuity, and the agility of the front-end experience team, and not having any dependencies on the back end. And so this whole thing about headless, no one needs or wants or will ever buy a headless platform, because everyone needs a head.
Well said. I think, Brian and I are going to talk about this in a moment, but I completely agree. We debated over whether to use the word headless or not for that very reason, but it is a term of art. It is used widely in the industry, which is why we took a stab at defining it at the beginning. I'm not sure everybody even agrees on the way we defined it, but I do agree that headless is a bit misleading, and now it's evolving into new ideas as well, because people are discovering, like you did, that headless may be not the right word. So Peter, thank you very much for your thoughts on this. And Brian, let's go to the decision.
Very dramatic. I love it. So what a great debate, Andy. And I think my key takeaway here is really know thy customer, right? And I think Peter was just talking about different aspects of that, and I think he's really the key here. And Brandon here just contributed something. I think the argument so far is 100% on fit, and I think he's right. I think it's really understanding your customer, your use case, and not necessarily solving for something that you don't need to. So I still believe there's a very strong case for full stack solutions, particularly when it's a straightforward implementation where you've got limited systems, a limited scope, limited number of customers. I mean, I read these use cases, Andy, and I talk to companies who express the value of headless, and some of the functionalities they're talking about that they view as valuable in the headless scenario can be done in full stack. Things like wish lists, and it's a lot of these things are commodity functionalities. You really have to look hard at your use case. So what'd you take away?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so going into this, my sense was that there are distinct uses for both architectures, and that effectively what is essentially happening over time is that because of microservices-based architectures and the use of APIs, is that headless is getting more attention out of this. But I think it's uncovering, just like my hair clippers example, that it's really easy to overbuy on functionality. And so you have to decide, okay, what use cases matter to you and what do you really, really need? You can buy things you don't need. You can get developers excited about things that you're never going to use, and you can end up drifting off in the wrong direction. So as always, it's the same argument, and this is just basically a follow-on discussion. Know what you're going to use the commerce platform for, which is what you just said. It really depends on what customers are you going to serve, how are you going to delight them, and how are you going to differentiate. So I've always said that, the lead dog here is the customer experience, and then the follow-on dogs are the technology platforms. Headless gives you great flexibility without a doubt, and it gives you the ability to customize things maybe in an easier way than you can, or better way, I should say, than you can with a full stack solution. But keep in mind that this flexibility can be a bane as well as a boon.
Yeah, that's great.
I think companies need to think long and hard about how they're going to use it.
Yep. And Andy, one piece of advice I give our audience today, and I've learned this the hard way in 20 years in this business: take your time. Do this right, because there's a lot at stake. You do not want to re-platform more than once in 10, 15 years. I mean, I think Peter, Vincent, Adrian, they all made that argument. This is something you want to do carefully. And I see this disturbing trend, particularly with COVID-19. Companies are trying to get to market really fast. I get that. We all get that. But look, you got to, if you take your time and make sure you do the selection carefully and evaluate these points, you're going to appreciate it. You're going to keep your job, number one, but you're also going to appreciate the ROI that comes from your effort. So know thy customer, know thy use cases, and you'll be better off for it. So Andy, I think I need to go on to now the rounds, and let's talk about you and I. Let's talk about what who we think kind of won each round. All right, round one.
Close.
Oh yeah, look at that. Does the flexibility headless promises offer more value than the simplicity? Interesting. Interesting. Yes.
It
So
sounds like
that
the audience is kind of split on this
yeah.
one and I think it does depend on the digital maturity, the resources you have, all the issues we covered here. Arguably more mature, more resource-rich environments are more capable of handling a headless approach, and the opposite is also true. And I'm not surprised to see the split. You?
No, I'm not actually, because I think again, I think it speaks to the use cases out there. Some folks, like Adrian, get enough from their current system and have enough flexibility with APIs to make it work, whereas others need that significant amount of headless. Andy, we should take on the IT versus business discussion also at some point, because I think that
Well, somebody just commented that this means there are more IT people on the call than business people.
That's what I was thinking. So,
You can also
all
be
right.
more mature companies versus less mature companies. I mean, I think that's a funny statement, but it really does depend on where you're coming from on this for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, all right, let's go to round two, Robert. What do we got there? Okay. Wow, interesting. Does the headless approach only really work for B2B businesses with specific profiles? No. So that one by double almost. So that means that companies think that, or our audience thinks that headless, is a solution for really all kinds of companies. That's interesting, Andy. What are your thoughts?
I'm surprised by this one because I think it really does fit companies with specific profiles. I don't think headless is the right choice for certain companies. I just don't. Just like I don't think full stack is the right choice for certain companies. So that's why we asked this question. We wanted to see if it was a headless for all environment versus a full stack for all environment. I think thoughtful companies are going to look at this. I mean, this is my take on it, and say, look, it really depends on how we're going to use this. And I think it does ascribe to a particular profile. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely 100%. I mean, I think about the cases in my book, Bosch and others. I think about the large global companies. And then I think about some of the mid-market companies, or certain where there's less sort of complexity, and there's less sort of, you don't need to solve for the edge case. Maybe you don't have you're not manufacturing equipment that's sitting in the field that needs IoT or Internet of Things enablement, things like that. So yes, I agree. This is a little surprising though. I agree with you. All right, let's go to round three, Robert. Pull it up. Interesting. Another one, very close. Are you overbuying flexibility and capacity with, wow, interesting. The audience thought 52% that you're overbuying flexibility and capacity with headless, and 48% no. That's interesting, because, because you buy headless doesn't mean you have to use everything headless gives you, right, Andy? What do you think?
I think what people are saying is that they have a preference for headless, but they know they're overpaying for headless, or they're overbuying for headless. So they want more flexibility, and it's coming full circle. I mean, we see these numbers as they come in, but it's almost the exact same experience I had with my trimmers. I keep coming back to that. I overbought.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I know I overbought. And so in hindsight, I wish I bought something less. I could have saved, 50% on the Clippers. It wasn't a ton of money, but I did overbuy for it. But I, like everybody else, I think has a preference, and it's human nature for more flexibility, more options.
Yeah, and I do think that's the key takeaway here. Is headless the future of B2B e-commerce? It definitely has a role, and I definitely think it's part of the future of e-commerce for sure. But I have to go back and agree with Adrian's first quote that full stack isn't going anywhere. I think we're going to continue to see it for certain use cases. So I want to thank our participants today, Adrian, Vincent, and Peter. You guys did a fantastic job on this. Great points and great debates. Thank you all for joining us. Andy, it's been another great session. I'm going to call you, by the way, Andy, the hairdresser Hoar from now on. Look out for that, Mr. Hair Clippers. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.